Vinny, here's the problem I have with simply saying don't let any of them in, and if they're all here, throw them all out. A lot of these people, as we've heard from Matt, who served alongside some of them, a lot of them are good, decent people who were properly vetted, who have lived in America now for a number of years with their families, committed no crimes, giving no indication they're going to commit any crimes, are not radicalized. And we all know if they get sent back to Afghanistan and they are identified as people who worked alongside US forces against the Taliban, we may as well execute them before they even get there.
More Piers Morgan content. I saw Destiny on here, so that's why I got interested. Because at least Destiny comes on here and makes a show out of it. So let's see the show. Let's see the show. All right.
This PBD podcast, Angry Patriot, Vinny Ashana, liberal streamer, Destiny, the co-founder within our lifetime, Nadine Kazwani, and Matt Tardillo, who's a podcaster and retired US Army Special Forces soldier. Well, welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Nadine. Welcome back to Uncensored. Obviously, this is a despicable act of terrorism against two members of the National Guard and has rightly caused outrage. At the same time, there are calls for now every Afghan that was brought to the United States, many of whom risked their
I had no idea Piers Morgan debated vegetarians.
own lives during the war to fight against the Taliban to now be deported back to Afghanistan, where they could meet possible death at the hands of the Taliban they fought. So this is a complicated issue. What is your view about what has happened here?
I mean, as you mentioned, I believe in the previous segment, the shooter previously served in one of the US-backed paramilitary units in Afghanistan that's been funded by the CIA. So I think if the US had never invaded or occupied Afghanistan and never built or armed proxy forces, the shooter or someone like him wouldn't have ended up here, committing the act that he did. So, this is constant.
That's just a ridiculous statement to make. If experience past did not happen, this wouldn't have happened. I'm like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? I mean, you can have as much issues, as much problems with the Afghan and war as you want, but if we're talking about a current circumstance that took place, I don't see why we're making that claim. I don't see it at all why we're making that claim.
And blowback, and we see this.
Well, you could go back further, though, couldn't you? If you were being reasonable about it, you could go back to if Osama bin Laden hadn't ordered the terror attacks on the World Trade Center that killed nearly 3,000 people, then it wouldn't have been necessary for US forces to go into the country that had been harboring him.
But who funded Al Qaeda? It's
okay,
the same argument.
Again, you can go back as long as you want, but I think to put it in context, obviously the reason that the United States were fighting in Afghanistan was as a response to 9/11. So that is the context. December is Heart Awareness Month, which makes you think differently about the busy holidays.
Who funded Al Qaeda? Who was she about to say? Was she about to say America funded Al Qaeda to bomb itself? Is that what she was about to say?
I mean, at the end of the day, the people of Afghanistan weren't guilty for 9/11. It's these constant wars. It's these constant attempts at regime change. It's the creation of refugees, the destabilization of the Middle East that's constantly going to create this scenario at the end of the day. I mean, and the fact that the National Guard shouldn't have been in D.C. to begin with. I mean, Sarah, the woman who was shot, had told her boyfriend that she felt like being there was pointless. It's really a show of force to distract from multiple things that Trump ran on and failed on. He ran on affordability. He ran on ending foreign wars, yet they're trying to enact regime change in Iran and Venezuela. They're continuing to arm genocide in Gaza, continuing to arm the bombing of Lebanon. And at the end of the day, this is, going to create blowback where people in the U.S. are going to pay the price. People around the world, innocent people around the world, are going to pay the price, whether with their tax dollars, with their lives, with the decline of the economy. And this is all a distraction at the end of the day. They're scapegoating immigrants instead of looking at the real root of the problem, which is U.S. imperialism wreaking havoc, pillaging people around the world, and not caring, not doing anything to solve these issues here. I mean, like you also mentioned in the previous segment, how many U.S. veterans come back and commit violence at home. So I don't think it's an isolated incident, and they just want to use what happened in DC to scapegoat all immigrants instead of looking at the real cause of the issue.
I think for the most part, she added a lot of points over there to really just showcase that she dislikes American imperialism. Sure, whatever. I don't really care. I will say this. Her a very much attached point to this conversation that Afghanis are becoming scapegoats to this terrorist attack is true. Everything else was just like, I want to shit on America. Here we go. And she locked in. She morphed, went Power Rangers, Modern Morphin, Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder. She went crazy. I was hoping Bin Laden just to piss off Soviet Union, and then Osama flipped the table in the U.S., and then they accused Iraq of 9/11. Base.
Warhawks and neocons in Washington, the architects of occupation and regime change in Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, creating the instability that forces people to flee. I mean, 1 minute they're calling people HTS and other groups in Syria terrorists, and other minute they're meeting with them, then they're funding them. It's all political convenience.
All right, Vinny Shah, your response to that.
Well, first of all, saying that, if Sarah wasn't in Washington dressed in uniform, she wouldn't get shot is complete bullshit. Because guess what? If it wasn't her, you don't think this Afghani terrorist would have found somebody else to shoot, just a regular person? And I'm going to go back, Piers. This all goes down, and as my veteran brother will attest, the most abysmal withdrawal of Afghanistan. We can talk about why we're there, and I'll agree with you on 9/11 and all that was complete BS. Everything that followed 9/11 with the illegal war. But how do you bomb a country for 20 years, and then Biden with Alejandro Mayorkas, you let in 80,000 people, no documentation, you can't vet them, there's no paperwork on them, and what do you expect for them to do while they're here? And that's exactly what happened, okay? You can't assume that these people are going to love America. They hate America.
So he completely lied about Biden just allowing people in with no paperwork. And I'm pretty sure this guy came into the country under Donald Trump. I'll fact check that out. I feel like Destiny's probably going to say that. So, I mean, am I surprised? This guy's always red and he's constantly lying. He wears a cross but has no virtue. One of these days I may dive into these kind of Middle Eastern conflicts. From my knowledge, I do know that there has been, for the most part, agreed upon a sentiment that there was no weapons of mass destruction. And of course, 9/11 is 9/11. So the retaliation helped Bush become president. I will say that, it's important to focus on the issues that the focus on in America right now to ensure that we get back to a level of normalcy. But it is kind of concerning on some of these locations in the Middle East, the way they treat certain people, especially like women and the people who don't believe in the religion. It's very unfortunate. I believe in liberalism and freedom, so I'm never going to be a fan of that stuff, ever.
They absolutely hate America, and there needs to be accountability for Mayorkas and the entire administration for letting these people in.
Let's be very clear, too. There was a group of Afghanis who helped us remove us from, not only helped us get out of Afghanistan, but also helped us in the fight against the terrorist organizations in Afghanistan. Those are the people we're trying to help. The ones that helped us. But when you look like a mob boss from a 60s movies, you don't give a fuck about anybody else but your own, your family, your familia. No surprise. These fake Christians are pieces of shit, so they don't really give a fuck about anybody else. Iraq had nothing a weapon of destruction. We only had nuclear reactor for electricity generation. You're Iraqi? You said we. I mean, that's what I've heard, that there was no weapons of mass destruction.
And on top of Afghanistan, what about our border? There's 2 million getaways, Piers. That's the freaking population of Nebraska. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their intentions are. And these people hate America, Piers. Plain and simple. There's no paperwork. There's no nothing. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the tip of the iceberg. What this guy gets to Sarah got rid of. Trump has no other choice. Piers, it's funny how blame Biden. Explain that to me.
Well, let me bring Matt Taddeo in. You're a former U.S. Army Special Forces soldier.
When you yell that loud, you're not saying anything of substance. He's full of shit. He's just lying, and I'm not interested to hear what he has to say.
Served in Afghanistan. First of all, it seems to me that at the crux of this problem, there's been a catastrophic failure both in the withdrawal that we all watched in horror on television, the way that was carried out, which involved a lot of deaths at the time. There was a sense of a duty of care to many Afghanis who had served alongside US forces and UK forces and others to preserve their safety from a Taliban they had been attacking, which made perfect sense. But there's also been a systematic failure, it seems, of vetting, with many people who were brought back to the United States not being properly vetted, not even having face-to-face interviews. So first of all, what happened with these?
Yeah, what happened to the 2 National Guardsmen was clearly an act of terror. 100%, make no mistake about it, it was an act of terror. And just because he ended up serving with U.S. forces over inside of Afghanistan for a period of time doesn't ensure that he is not going to commit acts of terror. At one point in time over in Afghanistan, for a very long period of time, we ended up having something called the Guardian Angel program, where we would have to have soldiers dedicated to watching our backs at all times, 24/7, to make sure we weren't getting shot in the back. These were known as green on blue incidents. They were profound. They were happening all the time. One of our officers ended up getting shot in the head while he was on a Skype call with his wife, right? The guy ended up walking in to the place where he was making this phone call and shot him right in the back of the head, right? This is not an isolated incident. Seen things like this happen. And it's also not the only time, right? And we are not painting all Afghans this way. I was talking to a man who I signed his SIV paperwork to come into the United States of America that I know is a good, honest, hard-loving, hardworking citizen. A lot of these people have done more for the United States of America than most Americans. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that they were not vetted and that we did have terrorists come into this country. Joe Kent went before Congress and testified and stated that we've had thousands of known terrorist affiliated Afghans come to the United States of America because they were not vetted. I've interviewed the soldiers and Marines who are on the ground at H-Kaya over in Kabul, and they will tell you that they weren't even given proper training on the paperwork that they should have been screening before they were coming on the base. And then you had members from the Department of State that would walk up to them and tell them forget about the paperwork or add different things going on to it. It was an absolute joke. And so, yes, we do need to make sure we're going through, and we do need to make sure that we're properly vetting these people. It's not an attack on the Muslim community. It's just a fact.
But
U.S.
Matt,
isn't destabilizing the Middle East.
You've given some fascinating background there and some color to it. But you've also highlighted, I guess, the problem here and how it gets dealt with in terms of going forward.
Right.
Because there are clearly some Afghan people that were brought back from the war that you believe are good, decent people who served America's interest at great personal risk to their own lives. Who I presume you would feel that there's a duty of care to and that they should be allowed to stay. So how do you determine who's
a very stark difference from this guy? He said, "Fuck all Afghanis and they can get the fuck out of my country. You're too brown." They're debating on how the Trump administration basically said "fuck all Afghanis" after the terrorist attack of the Afghanistan individual who shot 2 National Guardsmen. So I would have to look into whether or not I probably could just go live on YouTube too right now, I think. All right. My thing is, so what I would be curious about is how much of these people are actually not vetted. Because regardless of how experienced you are, your experience in your field, your expertise as being a soldier, that does not mean that you know everything that goes on in terms of the dynamics of 1, the chain of command, 2, the procedures of a withdrawal of individuals that is not specifically associated with what you got going on. Like you said, you had to interview people. So I'm never, just because you have a certain level of expertise doesn't mean you know what the fuck you're talking about. So I'd have to look up. I guess I could look it up here. How many Afghans were not vetted? All right, let's read this article. The shooting of 2 National Guard members, one of whom later died in Washington, D.C., has led to a major immigration policy changes by the Trump administration. I already knew all that. Suspended processing all immigrant requests related to Afghan nationals pending further review of security and vetting protocols. What has been said about Afghan vetting under Biden? The DHS said the suspect, 29-year-old Ramanullah, can't say that, entered the U.S. under an Afghan resettlement scheme, Operation Allies Welcome. The scheme was launched in August 2021 under the Biden administration to resettle vulnerable Afghans after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan in the same year. They came in, they were unvetted, they were unchecked, said Trump, who called a reporter stupid for asking why he blamed the Biden administration for the Washington attack. In an FBI news conference, the agency's director, Kash Patel, claimed the previous administration made the decision to allow thousands of people into the country without doing a single piece of background checking or vetting. So, of course, it comes from Kash Patel, it comes from Trump. I'm always just going to assume they're lying. JD Vance, I'm going to assume he's always lying as well. And a press release on the day of the attack, the DHS said the suspect is one of thousands of unvetted Afghan nationals left into the country under the Biden administrations. He made similar remarks about vetting failures in an interview with CBS earlier this year. How did the shooting suspect arrive in the U.S.? The U.S. last name I can't pronounce, entered the U.S. through OAW on September 8, 2021, shortly after the fall of Kabul. Many Afghans faced a serious risk of persecution by the Taliban, particularly those who had worked with Western governments. More than 190,000 Afghans have been resettled under OAW and another program he called Enduring Welcome, according to a report published this year by the U.S. State Department. Most Afghan nationals arriving on the OAW program were given permission to stay in the country for 2 years under a process known as parole. Afghans on parole are subject to reporting requirements such as medical screenings and critical vaccinations, includes their right to stay in the U.S. if these requirements are not met. Those who took significant risks to support U.S. troops in Afghanistan were admitted as lawful permanent residents after completing this special immigrant visa process. According to the charity Afghan EVAC, Lachlan Wall had an active SIV application, was granted asylum this year under the current Trump administration. So he was granted asylum by Trump, and Biden was going to give him permanent residency after he finished the application. So whose fault was it? Was it Trump or was it Biden? Because it sounds like Trump is the one who let him in. That's what it sounds like. But we'll continue reading. How were Afghans vetted under the scheme? We contacted the White House for more details about Lachlan Wall's vetting. It did not provide them, but told us this animal would have never been here if not for Biden. Okay, so Biden propaganda, bunch of lies, bunch of bullshit. We all know this is bullshit. I mean, the Epstein files and different like leaked text messages has made it very clear that when in doubt, they're just going to blame Joe Biden about anything that they can to win political points. They said this verbatim. So anytime they do this, this is just a political strategy because they are pieces of shit. So let's be very clear about that. An archived government website for the OAW scheme, last updated at the start of this year, mentioned a rigorous and multi-layered vetting process, which involved collecting biometric information such as fingerprints and photos from Afghans before they were allowed to enter the country. Interesting. It mentions multiple government agencies involved in vetting, including the FBI and National Counterterrorism Center. Interesting. Then the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, said in 2021 that the government had established a robust screening vetting architecture under the scheme. Interesting. Been a mixed reports. Basically, all the MAGA cultists said there was no vetting, but they're like pathological liars, so I don't really believe any of them. A 2022 audit carried out by the Office of Inspector General, a U.S. government oversight body, found that some information used to vet evacuees through U.S. government databases was inaccurate, incomplete, or missing. Okay, that's a very vague thing, saying some, but that is not good. The OIG said the problem was partly as a result of the DHS not having a list of Afghan evacuees who lacked sufficient identification documents. It's also reported that the U.S. Customs and Borders Protection admitted or paroled evacuees who were not fully vetted into the United States. 2 years later, another OIG audit of the The scheme found weaknesses in the government's ability to identify potentially negative information, such as national security concerns about some Afghan parolees. However, earlier this year, the OIG commended the FBI for its role in screening Afghans on the scheme. Overall, we found that each of the responsible elements of the FBI effectively communicated and addressed any potential national security risks identified, it said. So there were some criticisms, but it also said the FBI, which is a part of the process, did a good job. Hello. Alex Noratsesh, an immigration analysis at the Cato Institute think tank, said the program was more inconsistent than usual by OIG accounts and compared to the more intensive refugee review processes. Because of the chaotic nature of the evacuation, information was lost and some checks weren't run until the migrants were already out of Afghanistan. So there was definitely vetting. There were some issues with it because of the chaotic way of they withdrew, but for the most part, everybody was vetted, and the guy was vetted as well. He was supposed to fill out an application, but Donald Trump gave him asylum. So, okay, let's continue. So we confirmed this guy was full of shit, and this guy's full of shit. That's what we confirmed, while also recognizing that there was probably some issues going on for how they were doing it. It wasn't foolproof, like by any means. 100% weren't vetted. It wasn't all correct information. Like, it wasn't a perfect system by any means.
Who is thrown out?
By doing the proper due diligence. People that got on the airplane that had photocopies of somebody else's paperwork have absolutely no business being in the United States of America. And unfortunately, because of Joe Biden, we have to go back and check all of this paperwork to make sure the right people are here in this country. I spoke to one of those Afghans just the other day who's here living in the United States of America, and he's just as pissed off as everybody else in the country because these jihadists are wrecking the United States and are trying to kill Americans. Over inside of Fort Worth, Texas, there was a and I
don't care.
He
what
said on Friday,
have to say.
Tons of my brother active and properly progression.
Support on your ears. And the final point I make, man, war having an impact on. He was put up here to a severe PTSD. You think there's
how it actually works? I'm a huge PTSD advocate. Isn't it PTSD as an excuse?
Oh my goodness! It's like, and you give these motherfuckers so much time to talk.
Doesn't make any sense because he was 17. No, those
MAGA get all the time to talk.
Now, at the same time, over out the border inside Piers village, people that name to involved and
time, decades later,
you might be asking, why am I skipping? Because I just don't trust these people's analysis of the situation. If your conclusion is but Biden, then you lost all credibility to me. You just do.
No, it's worse, and it's the destabilization of the power vacuum.
Let's talk. No, it's not destabilization and a power vacuum. There's a power vacuum and destabilization that existed before we went there. That's just a fact. All right, the Taliban ran the country. We ended up putting in a government. The United States government has absolutely zero business, as far as I'm concerned, or most veterans are concerned, going in and trying to conduct a.
They're discussing Afghanis, the National Guardsmen who died, whose fault is it, all that stuff.
Regime change in any type of country. We suck when it comes to nation building. Our record's horrible. Even if we look at Iraq and we talk about what's going on over inside of Iraq and them trying to pass laws for 9-year-old girls to be able to get married to grown men, all right, that's not exactly what I would call a huge victory for democracy. All right, but over inside of Afghanistan, the moment we pull out, we have 6-year-old girls getting married off to grown men. 10% of the girls inside of Afghanistan under the age of 15 end up getting married off. And I think it's an absurd number. It's like 60% or something like that end up getting married off before they're even 18. And this is their family selling them off to older grown men. And don't even get me started on chai boys. To sit here and pretend like you shouldn't be.
I do want to bring. Okay, listen. Hang on. I do want to bring in. Hang on, Nadine. I will come back to you. I do want to bring in Destiny. Who's been waiting very patiently. Destiny, you posted on X.
When in doubt, let him talk. When she wants to respond, nope, cutting her off. That's the Piers Morgan strategy. MAGA gets to say whatever they want. They get to say how long as they want. They get the final word. And then I'll sprinkle in some people who are not MAGA.
The National Guards weren't protecting DC. They couldn't even make arrests. They were sent there to die by Donald Trump and his cronies so they could rile up the base to distract them from the monumental failing of every single part of this administration. Now, people have criticized you for this because they say it just shouldn't matter whether they were there for legitimate reasons.
Piers Morgan only brings on Destiny so he can criticize a tweet he made. Like, that's the only time he brings him on. So he has some more high ground because he knows he can't compete with Destiny in a real debate.
Reasons, or whether you question the politics behind it or whatever, that shouldn't mean that they are a target for terrorists.
The main point is that Donald Trump is using whatever he can to expand his power over the executive, to send more troops to whatever state or district he wants for no other reason than to just.
This is how this feels for me listening to this. Is the same how you would feel if Afghanistan was a world superpower. Instead, we're debating on TV on whether or not they should be invading America or not to abolish gay marriages. Yeah, I mean, I'm all about liberalism. So if a country doesn't have liberalism, I think that's problematic. I believe in freedom and rights. However, I do think trying to justify an invasion without proper evidence is problematic. I just don't have enough information about Afghanistan to make any definitive claims.
Antagonize the population. The idea that you can send 1,000 National Guardsmen to DC or to California, two places where he's currently losing federal cases about his authority to even do this, and somehow magically fix all the crime there is the naivety of a 12-year-old. None of what's been said so far about all of the people that were brought here passes any basic sanity test. There were some 77,000 people that came from Afghanistan. The idea that we didn't vet any of them and only one or two extreme instances of any kind of violence or planned violence has happened it just doesn't pass a basic sanity test. Well, where are all of the terrorist attacks that should be happening? We really brought over almost 80,000 people and didn't vet them at all. Also, the idea that there was no vetting whatsoever is contraindicated by the statements of our own.
Well, nobody's saying there was no vetting, but they clearly has been. Well, they're not saying there was no vetting.
That's a lie. He said. I think he said there was no vetting. He said there was no vetting. He said there is literally no vetting. But of course, you're going to defend it because you always, that's what you do. You defend MAGA as much as you want. He said there's thousands. He said no vetting. He said thousands. Do you think anyone who actually lives in Afghanistan think these people who want to invade their country are on their side? Oh no, by no means. I think I'm very comfortable in saying that if someone were to come to my country, even if there was like a level of something problematic with it, I think it's fair to say that you question the ulterior motives behind the country, especially because guaranteed there was terrible people who were in Afghanistan doing some terrible stuff during that war. So I am very sympathetic to that reproach for sure.
No, but hang on, just to be clear,
there's no way
nobody is saying there was no vetting. But what is crystal clear is that they weren't all vetted. And what is also crystal clear is that some of the people who were brought over have clearly either were radicalized to start with, have slipped through the net, or have become radicalized since arriving in the US. That is a danger to the United States
why this guy shot the two National Guard. We have no idea why the shooting happened. Anybody jumping on your Nancy Maces, the two gentlemen on this panel.
Then how do you account for the guy last week that was planning on building a car bomb, literally talked about putting explosives inside of a car over in Fort Worth and attacking Americans that were against the Afghans and against the Taliban? The reason why you haven't seen massive...
We're talking about the guy that shot the two National Guardsmen. We have no idea why.
We're talking about vetting Afghans. We're talking about vetting Afghans here in the United States of America. You want to talk about that guy. You don't want to talk about the Afghan that was planning on building a car bomb.
Responsibility.
No. The topic isn't about that guy.
Who was the one who negotiated the pullout from Afghanistan?
So far off.
I'm curious. Who negotiated that plan? Who negotiated that plan? Tell me. Can you even say who negotiated the plan? Can you even say who negotiated the plan?
I'll tell you that Donald Trump negotiated the plan, and on congressional record in November, and this comes from the former Joint Chief of Staff, in November, Donald Trump planned to do the pullout. Then when the Joint Chief went to him and told him, no, you can't do that because the Taliban's going to take over, Donald Trump immediately rescinded the order within 24 hours. It was under Joe Biden that he decided to pull out of the country. That is fact. It's on congressional record. Go look at the congressional record. You might not like it, Destiny, but it's a fact.
We just hear
the Doha agreement was on it. The Doha agreement was on there. The Doha agreement was done by Trump. Then the Taliban violated the Doha agreement, so we weren't going to pull out. That's why Joe Biden fell into the situation that he did. Now, you might not like facts, Destiny, because they go against your narrative, but they're facts. And it's congressional record.
Hang on. Okay, let me jump in. Look, what is...
Well, let me jump in when Destiny's about to respond. Let me jump in when the lefty girl is about to respond. But I got to make sure the MAGA guy finishes. But I'm going to jump in when the left responds every single time. This is why I hate Piers Morgan. He's such a fraud. Why did I torture myself by watching this? Do I hate myself? Do I hate myself? Is that the problem here? I must hate myself because I can't believe I'm wasting my time watching this smut. All right. Well,
inarguable is that when the withdrawal happened, the president was Joe Biden, and he had been for many months. It was on
Who
his.
was granted? Who
Hang
granted
on,
the shooter
hang
asylum?
on.
Who granted the shooter the
He could have
Guardian
changed.
asylum?
He could have ripped up any plans if he wanted to. He went ahead with that plan, and it was a total fiasco.
hang on. I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to ignore it completely, even though Donald Trump granted the shooter asylum, even though Joe Biden required him to finish out an application, but Donald Trump granted him asylum. And I don't even want to like criticize Donald Trump for granting him asylums or his administration granting him asylum, but I don't give a fuck because MAGA has no morals. So just play the same game.
And we all watched it on live television. Let's not try and let Biden off the hook. He can blame Trump.
We're not letting Biden off the hook.
I
right
like
now,
holding.
Piers, I don't know
I
if
like
you
holding
guys are
presidents.
over, in the
Destiny.
UK,
I like to
Donald
hold.
Trump is
hang
the
on.
president right now.
I like to
Donald
hold
Trump
presidents
is
for
the
account
president.
for what happens on their watch. I think it's a fair
And
thing
this
to
shooting
do.
happened on
Whoever's in
Trump's
power.
watch. Yes. The shooting right now happened on Trump's watch.
Yes, it
correct?
did. So
To
the
a man that
question.
his
So the question then
department's granted asylum
becomes.
to, correct?
The question
and
then
the week
becomes.
prior to that, he said we need to. In the week prior to the shooting, he said we need to go through and revet everybody, didn't he? Did he not?
Didn't you just say there was no paperwork?
Didn't he just say that we need to go through and revet
them? When you
them?
said there was no paperwork.
That's exactly how you revet them. I said that they have photocopies of paperwork, and that comes from testimony of Marines and soldiers that were on the ground saying that they were.
My thing is struggling right now. Might have to end it soon. We'll see if it keeps on acting up. I'll go to normal speed. Maybe that'll help.
Photocopying paperwork, and that members from the Department of State would go up to the soldiers that were on the ground, screening the paperwork, and at times told them, "Don't even worry about it because it's all screwed up at this point." That's what ended up happening. Now, you might not like facts, Destiny, but they go against directly what you want.
Facts. Where are all of the
We already looked at the report about it. For the most part, it was a rigorous process, which was what stated. There were some problems with the withdrawal. They said the FBI did a very good job in like managing the process. So this guy, he heard some random person say this, and then it became his whole opinion, is what it sounds like to me.
100,000.
If there are 80,000 of them,
I just explained it to you.
That I saw brought in under this particular program.
Why would you not want them all vetted, Destiny?
Where all of the
Are you
terrorists?
not going to recognize the fact that the guy was planning on building a vehicle-borne IED? Are you not going to just acknowledge the fact there's a vehicle-borne IED?
Hang on, Matt. My question for Destiny is, why would you not want all of them re-vetted?
Why would you re-vet all of them if they've already been vetted? You got to be realistic on the amount of time and effort this is going to take, especially if it's going to put these people in limbo, especially if we have to send them back or put them under some type of limitation in terms of what they can do. Piers Morgan acts like all this stuff is so simple, man. He's asked like this is so simple. Ultimately, when it comes down to the situation, things are going to fall through the cracks. A perfect system just does not exist. There's going to be 1%, a fraction of a percent of people that fall through the cracks and do something stupid. That's just the reality of every society that's ever existed in every circumstance.
In light of this appalling attack.
Because this is security theater. It's a waste of time to say we're going to revet. We're
A
going to
waste of
reanalyze.
time.
It's like when Dove
A waste
said
of
we're
time to
save
see if
money in the
any more have
government.
been radicalized, given they weren't.
Are you going to revet every single? It doesn't mean anything. What do you mean revet? What does that even mean? They just
Yes, it
there's
does.
no real
You
paperwork.
check their
How are you gonna revet them?
credentials to see if they're here on false credentials, and if they are,
Why would they have
that
been
raises a massive red flag.
Why would they have been granted entrance into the United States if they were here under false
Destiny,
credentials? That doesn't make sense.
Many of them came in
how the
with false
SIV
documents. That is well known.
No, Destiny, do you know how the SIV program works? The Special Immigrant Visa program works for these Afghans that were coming here to the United States. What they needed to have paperwork-wise in order to vet them. Yes or no?
Yes, I do.
Okay, perfect. So guys like me who put my name on an official memorandum and said, this person should be here. Here's my contact information. Now, if somebody sends me an email that says, is this the person you vouch for? And the face looks like somebody else, and I say no, that's how you properly vet them. There's a lot of different ways you can go about doing it. And when there's multiple copies of the same paperwork for different people that ended up coming into this country, somebody's getting kicked out. And when we have somebody that planned on.
But this situation doesn't apply to the example you're referring to. This guy was filling out his proper work. He was in the middle of the program, And also, the only people who do the SIV, as we just read, are people who were like in combat and seriously helping the United States. This guy was given asylum in the middle of it. So this doesn't apply to him. He was given asylum. So why are they not angry? Oh, I know why. Because they're MAGA cultists who have no morals, no standards, complete hypocrites, and never criticize Trump for anything he does. So if you're angry at him not finishing the paperwork, you should be mad at Trump, right? Right? That's how it works, right?
Conducting a vehicle-borne IED attack in Texas just a couple days ago that got busted for doing it. You don't think it's important. You would rather watch Americans get blown
You're
up
trying
and
to
get
make
killed
the claim that this is an
offend
attack
somebody.
that could have. Please stop
When
with the virtue signaling. You only have so much time. You're
Afghans,
making the
it's not
claim that
virtue
we could
signaling.
have.
It's a fact.
You're making the claim that we could have vetted this stuff before it ever got to the United States. Again, for this recent shooting, we don't even know what the motivation was. There's no guarantee. This guy had 5 kids and lived in Washington. How are you gonna? What are you vetting for to even know that these guys?
We know what the motivation is for the. We know what the motivation is for the 2 guys in Oklahoma, and we know what the motivation is for the guy down in Dallas. All Afghans here on SIVs.
And what would
We
you have
know that
vetted for to
motivation.
catch
Is
these
that
guys?
enough
What would
for
you
you?
have
Let me
vetted for?
bring in
Is that
Vinny.
enough
I want to
What
bring
would you
in
have
Vinny.
vetted for?
No, I don't want to hear Vinny's fucking stupid ass statements. Accuses that. This thing is being so laggy right now. Hopefully, it's not as bad when I make a video out of it. Accuses of what?
They might be biding their time, Stephen. They might be biding their time.
Biding
and I'm
the
sorry, with
10-year
all due
sleeper
respect,
agents.
I don't
My
want to
God.
listen
Are
to
they also
any.
deep state
I don't want
Hillary
to
Clinton
listen to
assassins? Were they
any.
part of the Seth
Let me
Rich
finish.
assassination squad?
Let me finish. Stephen, are you the guy that was celebrating the fireman Corey Compouture that was shot? You were celebrating that he died at Butler. You're the same guy that
Nobody
said
is
conservatives
celebrating.
need to be
Nobody is
afraid.
the only
You're
person
a
that
piece of
celebrates them in the
shit.
United
No,
States is your
Stephen.
guy.
I know
Oh, you don't see lag, so it just might be my computer, which is fine then.
President
exactly
Donald
who
Trump.
you are.
It's President
The public
Donald Trump.
needs to
It's
know who
President
you
Donald
are.
Trump.
You're
Who was the
blaming.
shooter on
You're
that? Wasn't that
blaming
guy another
Trump.
registered
Yeah.
Republican?
You're
Crazy how they
blaming.
all seem to
You're
be coming from
blaming
your side.
Trump
You guys
for
have
everything.
nothing to say about it.
Listen, Stephen. You are a scumbag. I don't even know why they're
I
listening.
need you to
Who
pop
wants to
an
listen to
aspirin or
your
Tylenol.
opinion
I'm worried you're
on
about to have a
any
heart
man,
attack.
on any matter?
The
But
shades of
guess
red are getting a
what?
little
It's
scary
the
here,
tip of
Piers.
the
I don't know what kind of
iceberg.
liability you
And
guys
guess
All right,
have
no,
what?
to show,
Vinny,
but-
Vinny,
people
let
that
me
you
no,
voted
let,
for-
let me ask Vinny a
Yep.
question. Vinny, here's the problem I have with simply saying don't let any of them in, and if they're all here, throw them all out. A lot of these people, as we've heard from Matt, who served alongside some of them, a lot of them are good, decent people who were properly vetted, who have lived in America now for a number of years with their families, committed no crimes, giving no indication they're going to commit any crimes, are not radicalized. And we all know if they get sent back to Afghanistan and they are identified as people that worked alongside US forces against the Taliban, we may as well execute them before they even get there, because that is what the fate will be if they get back to Afghanistan. So I feel very uncomfortable, because the same situation applies to people in the UK. I feel very uncomfortable about these interpreters and other service people who may even have fought alongside our troops, right, who were fighting the Taliban because of this one incident, and others. And Matt's right, there have been others too, but it's a small number so far, that we take thousands of people, many of whom, most of whom, would be completely blameless other than they helped us, and we throw them to the Taliban wolves. Would you be comfortable if we suddenly see scenes on television released by the Taliban of them executing all these people who risked their lives for us?
No, I wouldn't feel good, Piers. But you know what? All that aside, I'm an American first. Okay.
So it's funny. Piers Morgan actually had a good take here. The idea that you send all of them back to Afghanistan for the actions of the minority is crazy. It's the same principle of like mass shootings. Let's take away all your guns because some people did a mass shooting. Terrible. But let's take away everybody's gun. The Republicans will whine and bitch and cry about that all freaking day long. They do it. They still cry about that stuff. Don't take my guns. Who cares if a mass shooting happens? But this happens. Get rid of all the Afghanis. It's funny that these people, like this guy, wearing a cross, you know, the cross that's supposed to symbolize being a child of God, a worshiper of Jesus Christ. These people are the worst Christians I've ever seen in my life. They don't give a fuck about humans. They don't give a fuck about other people. They only care about themselves and their people. I don't think that's what Jesus Christ is all about. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jesus Christ is about, oh, only specific types of people deserve God's love. Vinny's a piece of shit, but we knew this.
And I don't want one American dying from anybody from another country that we've been bombing, Piers. With all the compassion and that suicidal
But
empathy
why should anyone
bullshit
ever help us
doesn't
again?
flow
But
with me,
Vinny,
'cause-
why should anybody, but Vinny, why should
No.
anyone ever help the United States or the UK in a war again in the way that they helped us in that war against the Taliban if we just throw them all to the wolves and it leads to them being executed? Nobody would.
No, Piers,
Look, at
then
the end
guess
of the
what?
day-
Don't get into these stupid ass wars then. Well, I agree with her. No, I agree with her. Then don't get into these wars, Piers. But at the end of the day, Piers, America first, American lives. Well,
The only people allowed to take American lives is Americans themselves. Only Americans are allowed to take American lives. Nobody else. I don't know. I just don't understand this kind of skewed way of interpreting good and evil. It's not about, it's this ultra nationalism, which falls into fascism. Like, this guy's a fascist. This whole idea of like America first is falling into pretty much everybody that falls in line with this principle, that they're willing to sacrifice their morality to become the American first guy, where it's their entire identity. These people are fascists. I was doing some studying up on the idea of fascism, and the origins, the concept of fascism as it was being built was really about the nation above all else. Nation above religion, nation above morals, nation above everything. The nation above you as an individual. That's a core philosophy behind fascism. And it's funny to see exactly how that applies to MAGA perfectly. This guy, I think this guy's right here, probably not for the same reason as him, though. Don't get into these wars, and for all I care, you send these collaborators back. As someone from the Middle East, I could tell you that these people, the same as you view Nazi collaborators in Europe. I think that's weird, personally. So I don't really understand that. But I mean, hey, man, I'd have to do more research on some of these organizations in the Middle East, because I know for a fact that I've seen very, very troubling stuff that happens in the Middle East, and how certain people's rights are taken away. So it's tough. But what do you think is weird? Oh, because I don't see the idea to compare people fighting against the Taliban comparable to Nazis. But maybe there's a vacuum of knowledge that I'm missing, because I don't really research Middle Eastern conflict like that.
everybody who's eating
Maybe.
turkey and having a good time,
Maybe.
think about that girl's family, Sarah's whole family, grieving and burying their damn daughter. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm done with this. This guy's a moron. This conversation was stupid. But I wanted to see how it played out. Piers Morgan actually had a pretty good take here, so actually shout out him for sure. It's just, he understands right versus wrong, but the problem with Piers Morgan is that he is so biased to the right that he's willing to give so much more leeway to the people on the right and the crazy stuff they say, but is willing to jump down the throats of the people on the left. It's tough to see. It's tough to see.